Well, hello everyone and welcome. Welcome to Coffee with Dr. Tom. This is episode 9 of our time together in coffees. I hope you've got your coffee this morning. I've got mine and I'm going to bring my screen up here, share screen. So give me a moment while I do that so that we can take a look at some slides. Okay. So I'm going to assume my slides are on the screen right now. And I've titled this one, Building Your Army. And you've heard me say before that, Mrs. Patient, your immune system is the armed forces in your body. There's an Army, a Navy, an Air Force, a Marines, a Coast Guard. We call them IGA, IGG, IGE, IGM, all different branches of the armed forces, there to protect you. So in the first 8 days of Coffee with Dr. Tom, I've talked repeatedly of the importance of supporting your immune system, not suppressing your immune system, but supporting your immune system as a primary action step in dealing with this current pandemic that we've got. How do you support your immune system? And we're going to talk about some of those, but I'm going to talk about the big kahuna today in building your army. That's my goal in the next 20 to 30 minutes. So first, thank you so very much for being here. It allows me to do my work. When we get feedback from you and likes and little hearts flying up on the screen, you know, and the comments and the questions, it empowers all of us on my team. We're all very grateful for being able to do this work right now and carry this message out to you. So thank you so much for that. We're going to begin with, if there's a pearl on the screen, it means this is a pearl, and pick up on it. So I started off with this one in the first Coffee with Dr. Tom. Prevention is the ultimate principle of wisdom. To cure a disease after it's manifested is like digging a well when one is thirsty or forging a weapon after the war has begun. Well, unfortunately, the war has begun here now, and we need to learn more about how to build our army. But for the future, I hope for all the parents out there that you'll take some of these ideas and just begin the slow education process for your children of how can they support their internal army to protect them against all the bugs that we're exposed to out there. And my mentor, Dr. Jeffrey Blunk, made this comment a few weeks ago when we were first under quarantine. He said, it's important to remember that COVID is a lifestyle disease, meaning how we've lived our lives up to this point you've got no control over whether you get exposed or not. Yes, in the quarantines that we have now, we're reducing it. Our researchers call it flattening the curve so that not everybody's getting exposed all at once, but we are going to get exposed. The vast majority of us will get exposed. But whether or not the innate immune system takes care of you or not is determined by how we've lived our lives up to this point. How many foods we eat that really aren't good for us. They're called inflammatory foods. They cause more inflammation. This is a quick review for those of you that have been here before. I'm not going to take a lot of time to explain these ideas, but rather just to make sure they're in the forefront of everyone's mind as we get to the meat of the matter today. Coronaviruses are particularly adapted to evade the immune detection and dampen our immune responses. You know, it's a survival of the fittest out there with bacteria and viruses that we're exposed to. Who's more fit? Who's going to survive? And our immune systems have done a really good job for hundreds of thousands of years. And sometimes they are not able to keep up. And our goal here is to help you understand how we lived our lives so far and how we live our lives in the future determines whether our immune systems are strong enough to deal with the things we're exposed to now and the things we'll be exposed to in the future. That's a really important point. And we talked initially that The zero line on the left is everyone who's exposed. Those numbers are going up now. If you're keeping track of some of the news stories, they're saying that startlingly, a lot more of us have been exposed than researchers initially thought, because blood test results are coming back now, and a lot of people have immunity to COVID-19. And how do they have immunity to this coronavirus? It's because they were exposed and the immune system was capable of dealing with it. And how does it deal with it? Remember, we have two branches of our immune system. We have the innate immune system. Those are the guys that are in the trenches. And then we have the adaptive immune system, the big guns that come in if necessary in the background and then hang around in case anybody ever comes back. It's the adaptive immune system that makes the antibodies. And as we're testing people now, dramatically higher numbers of people are showing they've got the antibodies, which means they were exposed and their innate immune system was able to do what it needed to keep this thing in check. They didn't get sick. They didn't have to go to the hospital. And now the backup is making the antibodies to protect them in the future. As far as we know, having the antibodies to the coronavirus will protect you and your family next fall, when this thing, many doctors are saying this thing may come back again after the summer is over. And we'll see more about that now, because in Australia, their summer is ending and they're going into the fall. So lots of epidemiologists are keeping an eye on what happens in Australia to see if this thing comes back stronger when the weather cools down. About 20% though of those that are exposed, so after 5 days, 5 to 7 days of exposure, the zero box, about 5 to 7 days, some people start getting symptoms. They get a little fever, and we talked, I think it was coffee number 4, about the benefit of fevers up to about 103.5, 104, leave it alone, that it's your backup trying to get rid of the bug that you've been exposed to. Just go back and review that if you want to see the science on it. About 5 to 7 days, a little bit of fever, a little bit of cough, a little bit of diarrhea, and then they're fine. So those people, they should now be making the antibodies to coronavirus. They should be, and we recommend you do the test to find out, and we'll talk about testing. But about 20% of the people after 5 to 7 days have to go to the hospital because their symptoms are stronger. And at the hospital, the way it's been for quite a while has been, if you're not having a hard time breathing, go home. Come back if you have a hard time breathing, because they were just so overwhelmed. Well, the people that are sent home, what are they going to do? They're just sitting at home waiting. No, this is the time when you want to build your army. And is there anything you can do to reduce the 20% number? Yes, so that you don't get so sick, and that is to build the army. And that's why we talked about vitamin D and vitamin C and quinine, and why the government has been advocating the medications hydroxychloroquine, which is a quinine derivative and is used to fight malaria for the last 70 years. So there's a long history of why this thing works and how safe it is. Well, it comes from the quinine concept of dealing with malaria from back in India. And we talked about how tonic water has quinine in it. Now, there's no evidence that I've seen, I've been looking, there's no evidence that tonic water is going to prevent the symptoms of being exposed to coronavirus. There's no evidence. But there's no evidence it's going to hurt you. So why not have a minor dose of quinine by having a little tonic water every day? And it's about 1/5 or 1/6 the dosage for the medication. In some tonic waters, they have about 85 milligrams of quinine in them. Now, and we talked all about that, so go back and see the studies. But if you're going to have a little tonic water, just make sure you read the label and it says it's got quinine in it, because there's a lot of them out there that are inexpensive copycats using just chemicals and a lot of sugar. Don't drink those. Look for one that has quinine in it. One brand, I'm not advocating any particular brand, but one brand is Fevertree. You can go to the Fevertree website and look at the history about quinine. It's pretty interesting. Once again, no evidence that quinine is going to prevent you from getting symptoms if you have exposure. but it's not going to hurt. So why not? And the way that medication, hydroxychloroquine, and how quinine works is it helps zinc get inside your cells. And zinc stops the virus from shedding, from reproducing. Zinc stops it. But zinc in your bloodstream won't do it. The zinc's have to get inside your cell. And what helps zinc get inside the cell? They're called ionospores. And I went through that already. You'll see it back, and I think it's episode 6. But that's where quercetin is a vitamin, is a zinc ionospore. So it helps get zinc inside your cells. The polyphenols from fruits and vegetables help get zinc inside your cells. So that we'll talk a little more about foods here, but that's the concept behind those and why it's good to rebuild and strengthen your immune system, including these products. So lifestyle, how we've lived our disease to this point, is a critical component, and where we go in the future is more important. So we're going to talk about a couple of things with that. Now, once again, here's just one of the studies that shows fever's a good thing. Leave it alone. As long as it's less than 104, 103, 103.5, your kids or yourself don't feel well, but there's no danger for a few days if you've got 103.5 fever. Let your body do its thing, trying to kill the bacteria or kill the virus that you've been exposed to. We talked about sleep, and this book, I recommended this book by Dr. Matthew Walker. It's an excellent book to read. It'll give you an entire appreciation for why sleep is so important. And here we see Dr. Andrew Weil's group at the University of Arizona talking about, you know, if you get less than 5 hours of sleep, you have a 350% more risk of the virus developing inside of you, making you sick, catching a cold and all that, compared to people who sleep for 7 hours a night. So sleep just helps your immune system, and we talked about some of the reasons how and why in episode number 1, I think it was. Then we talked about the blue zones and how important the blue zones are. If you haven't read this book, this is the book. What do I mean by that? This is where the pedal hits the metal. These are the people that are living long lives, not on medications, fully functional in their 80s and 90s and over 100. They're all over the world. And this book looked to see where are these cultures and what's the common links in these cultures. And they said that if wisdom is the sum of knowledge and experience, these people have more wisdom than anybody else. And there's a lot of truth to that. You know, I would really suggest you read this book and think about, how am I following some of these principles or how am I not? That you want to, if you recognize the value in addressing lifestyle, this book gives you some guidelines on what are the aspects of lifestyle to address, so it's not all piecemeal. And there were 9 components to a blue zone lifestyle: moving naturally. Hara Hachibu means eat 20% less. Get smaller plates. If you've got 12-inch dinner plates, get 9-inch dinner plates. And then just wait 20 minutes after you've eaten your meal before you go for seconds. Why 20 minutes? Because it takes that long for the hormones in your digestive tract to tell your brain, I'm full now. And we talked about that in detail. Plant slant means a lot of vegetables, the colors of the rainbow, little bit of red wine, little bit having a purpose, a purpose in life. Downshifting means a little prayer every day or a little meditation every day. Belonging to a community. Critically important that you're part of a tribe. During this time of isolation now, many of us are stir crazy, if I can say it like that. Reach out on the phone, reach out on the computer to your cousin that you haven't talked to in 2 years. Say, hey, just thinking about you, how you doing? You know, it opens up, there's avenues now to be a little more exposed, to be a little more vulnerable to emotional connection with people. You know, it's okay to call somebody and say, I've been thinking about you, how you doing? We know that from our scientists now that there's unfortunately more abuse occurring when people are in isolation. There's more child abuse, there's more spousal abuse, there's more suicides right now. So people need help. People need to feel that they belong, that they're part of a community. So if you think about someone, reach out to them and just express your concern and wishing them a safe passage through this transition that we're in right now. And of course, the rainbow diet, we talked about that. I gave you the studies back in episode 2 or 3. The more colors of the rainbow that you're eating, the better. The deeper the colors, the better for you. So this is all the summary. And Dr. Tom Frieden, the former head of the CDC, telling us about vitamin D, how important vitamin D is. I did an entire episode on vitamin D. And we talked about the blood spot test and how important it is to know what your vitamin D level is. And you can do a finger prick test and ask your doctor for that. And if you don't have a doctor right now or you don't have access, you can do the finger prick test. Go to theDr.com /vitamin D test. And you can order the test. We send it to your house. You do a little finger prick for you and your family and send it off. Get one for each member of the family so you know what your vitamin D levels are right now. And testing for the COVID virus, we're going to talk more about testing as the tests come out and they're more available. But this is what you want to look for in testing. There are many different parts of the COVID virus, and we want many branches of the immune system, the armed forces, to test. So it's technically IgA, IgG, IgM to these components of the virus. That's the most comprehensive test right now. So let's talk today. What army do I want to talk to you about? So I want to give you a little background that's going to be a little jaw-dropping as to what's happening in our world and has been happening for the last 50 years. So more than 200 countries or territories supply, and 125,000 food facilities supply 32% of all the vegetables that we eat in the United States, 55% of the fruit, 94% of the seafood. It all comes from overseas. And that's a lot of food that's coming from overseas that the FDA has no control over. And surveillance efforts at more than 300 active ports of entry where shipments enter the US remains the essential element of our government's strategy to protect us from bad food, meaning they're surveying it. They're examining the food that's coming in. That's a good thing. We want that. But what people don't know is that the FDA is having to deal with human food, but animal foods and biologics, all the medications that are coming in, the drugs, medical devices, and tobacco. There is $2 trillion worth of imports that they're having to survey or have surveillance on every year. Well, here's the result. 98% of the US food is not inspected. The food imports, it's not inspected. This is where the recalls come from when we hear of a recall, but 98% of what's coming in is not inspected. What does that mean? It means we're exposed to bacteria, bugs, viruses all the time that are, if they were inspected, they wouldn't get through. But we're exposed to this all the time, all the time. The FDA has admitted 98% or more of the food that comes through the US borders is not physically inspected by the 2,000 FDA food inspectors. And of the food that is inspected yearly, 3,500 products are refused entrance to contamination by insect, rodent droppings, pesticides, drug residue, traces of salmonella, 3,500 products. I saw that number and I said, what? 2,000 inspectors, and every year about 3,500 products are refused entry? Do the math. That means that not quite 2 shipments per year are being refused by each inspector. If these guys are working 5 days a week, 50 weeks a year, they're refusing 2 shipments a year. Everything else is coming through that they inspect, and 98% of the stuff is not being inspected. when I read this, my confidence in the purity of our food was rocked to its core, meaning that we are likely exposed every day to things that we really should not be exposed to. Now, epidemiologists talk about the well-traveled salad. What the heck does that mean? Well, depending on what you put in your salad, look at where those ingredients come from. Lettuce comes from Canada, Chile, Dominican Republic, Mexico, Peru, and the US. Cucumbers come from Canada, Honduras, India, Mexico, Spain, and the US. And you go around the salad and you can see how the food, when we're eating a healthy salad, most of the vegetables we're buying are coming from overseas and they're not being inspected. Jaw-dropping when I saw these numbers. That doesn't give me a lot of confidence in the purity of our food. And you see they're coming from all over the world. Now, more than 250 pathogens, that means things that aren't good for you, and toxins are known to be transmitted by food, and this list continues to grow all the time. And these are the things that you find in food that aren't supposed to be there. And this comes from the Institute of Medicine. But wait, 98% of the food isn't inspected to see if it's got bacillus in it, or norovirus, or sapovirus, or trichinella. It's not inspected to see 98% of the food that's coming in. You see that and you go, what? Because so many of our administrations have been reducing the budget of the FDA, reducing the number of inspectors, reducing the facilities, and the dollars that it takes to hire the people and train the people and give them the equipment to do the job to inspect the food that's coming in. I'm sure our inspectors are working hard and they're overworked, but something's not working right here. If the average is 2 shipments a year for each inspector that are being refused entry into the United States, something's not working right. So if this is the norm in our country, and we're constantly exposed to bugs, viruses, parasites, how do we survive? How is that happening? How come we're all not sick as can be? Now, we're all concerned about this coronavirus, but I want to give you a little history so you understand how incredible your immune system is, how remarkable a job it's doing for all of us all the time, unless we put the emergency brake on. And you know what I mean by that? If you're backing out of a driveway and you're backing up, say, well, what's wrong with this car? And you're giving it gas and it's moving, but it's not moving very well. Oh, the emergency brake. And you let the emergency brake down, now you back out fine. When we put emergency brakes on our immune system, we get sick. If you got a little bit of fever, a little bit of cough, little bit of diarrhea or something in the 5 to 7 days after you didn't know that, but you were exposed to the virus, you got an emergency brake on. Now you were able to back up and your emergency brake called in the reserves, maybe you got a little fever and you knocked this thing down to smaller amounts. You didn't knock it out. You don't get rid of this thing. It stays, but you knocked it down to where it's not dominant, then you're fine, but your immune system is compromised. And if you had to go to the hospital, your immune system is very compromised. So get through what you have to get through right now, follow your healthcare practitioner's advice, take the medications that are recommended, do what you need to do, but recognize when the crisis is over, I need to reevaluate how I'm addressing my immune system. Am I putting the brakes on it? And how do you put the brakes on? Anyone who's been following me for a while knows the magic word is inflammation, right? At the cellular level, the cell's always on fire. Just, is it a brain cell or an immune cell or a blood sugar cell or a heart cell, a blood vessel cell? But it's always on fire. And is it gasoline or kerosene? So when your immune system is not working so well, it's possible it's from genetics. For a few people, you were born that way, but for the rest of us, it's because you put an emergency brake on. And what's the emergency brake? I don't know. For you, there are some common ones that you want to look at, right? We've talked about some of the common ones, and there's some common things that help to take the emergency brake off, like get your vitamin D level tested and test to see if you've got antibodies to the coronavirus now to protect yourself before the fall, and take your vitamin C and eat the rainbow diet, things like that. But where is our army? Why aren't we sick all the time if we're being exposed to all of this stuff? And it's because the microbiome outnumbers human cells, you know, the good guys in your gut. And it starts from the mouth and it goes to the other end. Right now I'm talking about there's a microbiome on your skin. There's a microbiome in each of your organs. We know that women with breast cancer have different bacteria in the infected breast than in the okay breast, that it's different microbiomes in the breast, that all of our eyes, all of our tissue has microbiomes, that we didn't know this 10 years ago, but we know it now. And the amount of bacteria in our bodies are 10 times more, bacterial cells and viral cells, 10 times more than human cells. There's much more of them than us. And we know that genes determine how our body functions, what proteins get made and all of that, and proteins determine function. There is 100 to 150 times more genes in the microbiome than in the human genome. So, you know, I've said this before with my friends at the Institute for Functional Medicine, when we're teaching somewhere, we go out to dinner or something, you know, you have a glass of wine. By the second glass of wine, we're having discussions. Are we humans with a whole lot of bacteria, or are we bacteria having a human experience? You know, it sounds kind of geeky, but it's really a profound thought that there's more of them than us. That's the fact, Jack, right? Just read the science. And if you're not a science geek, just go in the newspaper, go on Google. There's more of them than us. And they send out more messages. 1/3 of all the small molecules in your bloodstream at any time are coming from the microbiome. It's the exhaust of the microbiome, the proteins of the microbiome, sending the message out that goes to your brain. You've heard me say before, for every message from the brain to the gut, there are 9 messages from the gut to the brain. All of your nerve hormones, called neurotransmitters, your brain hormones, are produced, are controlled. The geek term is modulate, has its hands on the steering wheel by the microbiome in your gut. So turn the steering wheel just a little bit to the right, and 100 yards, you're off the road. That's what happens when you've got an abnormal microbiome. And there are many, many studies. If you want to look at this, just go to Google and type in depression and microbiome, anxiety and the microbiome, schizophrenia and the microbiome. And you see study after study after study. Now, it doesn't mean you take your antidepressants if your doctor is prescribed antidepressants. You do what you have to function in the world, right? But you have to address the microbiome. You have to rebuild your microbiome in order to get that done, to minimize the amount of abnormal messages going up to your brain, throwing your nerve hormones out of balance. So the composition of the intestinal microbiome plays a critical role in immune system development and function. Critical. So I thought I'd show you just a couple of the studies that we're exposed to for those of us that are reading the science, you know, the geeks. And what this study showed us was that mom in utero, we now know, now this study was from 2012, 9 years ago, right? We didn't know so much about in utero. We thought that the amniotic fluid that baby is developing in is sterile. No, it's far from sterile. And we thought that baby gets the microbiome from breastfeeding, and it's a different microbiome for babies if they're formula fed than breastfed. And this slide doesn't address birthing. I'll show you one that does in a minute. And then when baby gets solid food, depending on the food you give baby, determines what microbiome continues to develop in the baby's gut. And then as they're getting more mobile, they're toddlers, they're kids, they're going to school, they're eating school lunches, they're hanging out with their friends at school, they're being exposed to bacteria, they come home sick once in a while because they've been exposed to something their microbiome was not used to. And then as we age, we get into our adulthood, and if we develop obesity, that completely changes your microbiome. And then in old age, it's a different microbiome. Now, I saw this one, I thought, that's interesting. The average human palm has at least 150 different bacteria all the time, and they're not bad guys. You ever have a family member that gets some type of dermatitis or skin problem? Well, it's not a deficiency of a drug that causes that. It's a deficiency of a healthy microbiome that contributes to it, right? So, and this one caught me. A science study expanded on this understanding of microbial diversity in the skin, showing that forearms and underarms, though located just a short distance apart, are as ecologically dissimilar as rainforests are to deserts. What does that mean? It means there's a whole lot of bacteria in our axillary area. And when you've got really bad bacteria or the wrong kind of guys, you get body odor, right? And it's not a problem of this area, it's what's in your body. And people notice when they change their gut microbiome, their body odor changes over the months. Time and time and time again. The healthier your microbiome, the healthier the human. Bottom line. Now, when they look at psoriasis patients, they found 84 different species of bacteria never before known to be on the skin. Once the technology became available to look at the bacteria on the skin, much more detailed, they looked at psoriasis patients and 84 different types of bacteria that were never known to be part of bacteria on the human skin at all. And they're on the psoriasis patients. That the microbiome of the skin has a lot to do with the health of the skin. The microbiome of your brain has a lot to do with the health of your brain. The microbiome of your liver has a lot to do with the health of your liver. And they're all modulated, has its hands on the steering wheel by the master control center. And where's the master control center? It's in your gut. That's the master control center for the microbiome throughout your body. And there are many, many, many studies on that. Microbiologists have begun to replace the concept of human beings with a human superorganism because of the numbers that I've just shown you. And there's study after study after study on this. And it's changing the way that we think and that doctors think about this, because they're trying to reflect the emerging reality that the human genome is one of the myriad genomes dictating the human experience. It's only one, the human genome, of the myriad of genomes. There's the bacterial genomes, we call it the microbiome. There is the virus genome called the virome. That there are many different genomes in our body that all work together as a team. Nearly all humans acquire multiple persistent viruses within the first years of life. Viruses that generally remain with them throughout life. Because most of us are terrified of the word virus. Don't be. We've got hundreds of viruses in our body. They just learn to work in community together because every living thing in general, that's not true, or I shouldn't say every, most living things, the primary purpose is reproduction and survival. So if you have a virus that's going to kill you, how's that virus going to survive? They're really rare. That you've got hundreds of viruses in your body. I did a test recently and found out that I've got high levels of the cucumber virus. I said, where'd that come from? And I have no idea, but there were many viruses identified, but I had high levels of the cucumber virus. Okay, I didn't even know that there was a cucumber virus until I ran the test. And so what's that, right? But I just want to take the apprehension out of the word virus. Most of us now are comfortable with the word bacteria. We understand there's lots of bacteria in our body. Okay, many of us are not doing anything about it. I'm hoping to give you a little kick in the pants so you do something about it. You support the good guys to help get rid of the bad guys. And I'm hoping that you now will include in your understanding, okay, we've got lots of viruses. And how do we prevent the bad viruses from getting a stronghold in our body? So why aren't we sick all the time? A fully activated immune response should be capable of clearing the common pathogens from the body. Yet in viral and autoimmune diseases, this does not appear to be the case. So viral diseases, like the COVID-19 symptoms that we're getting from the coronavirus now, that's a disease. And sometimes we aren't capable of getting rid of the thing. So those people who were exposed, they didn't get sick, and they've tested and they've got antibodies, you've got a fully activated immune system. High five to you. It's working pretty well. And I'm hoping that you'll take some time to build your emergency brakes so that they're not activated even more. You build your immune system so it can work even more. But you're the ones, if you've got positive immunity and you didn't get sick at all, well, I may have had a little sore throat for a day, but I didn't really notice. Way to go. Way to go. Those of you that got fever, light fever or coughs or a little diarrhea for a few days and then you were fine, your immune system is not too bad, but it's not fully activated. It had to call up the reserves. And those of you that had to go to the hospital, you do not have an activated immune system that's working very well at all. And please take to heart these recommendations over these coffees with Dr. Tom, and you just start with one at a time and just started, okay, I'm going to address vitamin C. Okay, I'm going to address vitamin D. It'll take me a week or 2 weeks to really find out what's my vitamin D level. And then what vitamin D do I take? I have to do a little study on this, but all right, I'm going to do it. And then you address zinc and you address the rainbow diet, just one at a time, and you'll win the ball game. Now, arguably, the vast majority of cultures and civilizations around the world depend on our community service people to keep an order to how we all live together. I was trying to think of how to give you this analogy of your microbiome. What can you think of? And so let's think about police officers. Or my father was a firefighter. They risk their lives. These guys risk their lives every day, right? But let's think about a police officer. He's not just a guy walking around with a gun on his hip and making sure that you do this, you do, and do it. He's also a father, a spouse, a wife, perhaps, raising children, managing the local baseball team, helping out with the Cub Scouts. He's part of the community, but he's got a job that he's got to do. What would happen if we didn't have enough police officers around? What would happen if there were more hardcore criminals than police? And if the criminals outnumbered and outgunned the police? What would your neighborhood be like? Some people live in neighborhoods like that, unfortunately, in the world. But if you think about that for a minute, what would happen if there weren't police officers around our neighborhood right now and there were more hardcore criminals? How safe would I be? Would I let my kids go to school? Would I let him ride his bike over to his friend's house? You start thinking about that kind of stuff. That's your microbiome. When you're sick, if you get sick, this neighborhood of your microbiome has more hardcore bacteria and viruses that aren't supposed to be there than the good guys that are supposed to be there to protect you. There's 10 times more of them than of us, and 100 to 150 times more genes of them than of us that control function. Why wouldn't we be doing everything we can to support those guys, to support our police officers, to make sure they've got the equipment they need, to make sure the firefighters, you know, in the 1968 riots in Detroit, I grew up in Detroit, my father was pinned under a fire truck. They responded to a fire. He was pinned under a fire truck for 4.5 hours because there was a sniper on the roof trying to shoot firefighters. It's like, what? Really? The guy's trying to save your family's life and put the fire out and you want to shoot him, right? But what would happen if there were more hardcore criminals than police? That's what happens when you get sick. That means your immune system, 70% of the immune system is in your gut. It's the microbiome, which is the good viruses, the good bacteria, the good bugs that are there. They're all there to protect you. They're being outgunned right now. There's an emergency brake right now. And all the things that you can do to support that immune system, of course, the vitamin D is important, the vitamin C is important. Of course, taking any medications your doctor prescribes when you're sick is important. But then you, after you're done with the medications, you rebuild your microbiome. You rebuild your immune system. You strengthen your immune system. That's the critical piece that so many of us aren't thinking about, because it takes a long time to change the way we think. I didn't put the study in here, but it takes 17 years from the time translational research, meaning research that changes the way the doctors think, once it's published, 17 years before the article is published, doctors read it, and the doctor down the street is using it in his practice. The average is 17 years. No one would think that's just like, what? Like cholesterol. 17 years before the doctor down the street was using cholesterol, doing cholesterol tests to see about risk of cardiovascular disease. 17 years after the papers were first published. So we have to change the way we think. And the way we change, the way to change the way you think is by base hits. You've heard me say before, base hits win the ball game. What does that mean? You take 1 hour a day right now, because you're at home and you're not, you've got plenty of time. 1 hour a day to learn one more thing of how can I help my microbiome? So maybe I'm going to read about vitamin D today. And you'll read some of my stuff at theDr.com, read some other doctor's stuff about vitamin D. And you say, well, that just makes sense. All right, well, we can start with some vitamin D. And then the next day you read about vitamin C. And then the next day you read about fermented vegetables. And you start just one step at a time, because it's overwhelming to try to do all of this at one time. You can't. But you've got an opportunity right now. You know, this is a time, oh, I'll show you these slides too. So they just show you how the microbiome of baby is developing by mom's saliva and by the things that the food she eats, and if she's taking any probiotics and prebiotics, and they get into her gut, they go into the uterus, into the fetus, baby gets born through the vaginal canal in a natural childbirth. Baby gets washed in all this guck as baby's born. You don't wipe that off right away. It's the good bacteria that gets in baby's nose and eyes and ears and mouth and migrates down to colonize the gut, and it transfers to baby in the birth process. And then baby, depending on how breast milk is full of good bacteria, so baby gets inoculated there and the process begins. And here's another study on all of the ways that mom is passing the microbiome on to baby. And here's another study of how kids, when they're little, how their microbiome is developing. And look over on the screen right side here under intestinal function. Look at the first one that's listed, immune system maturation. What does that mean? It means developing the immune system, getting the immune system mature enough. And that's through the whole body. That happens in the gut by the microbiome. That's why it's so important that you have this much attention on your kids' microbiome. And you feed them, but you also feed their microbiome. So you consciously are feeding them with the purpose of including feeding the microbiome. And here, this study just shows how step by step through life, how we build our diversity. And for most old people, you see on the right side, they lose the diversity because they eat the same foods all the time. And there's other reasons, but that's a primary one. And in the blue zone, those people, the diversity of their microbiome is tremendous. It's like a young person, like a 30-year-old, for people in their 80s and 90s who are healthy and vibrant. And I really like this one because I unfortunately have been more like the guy on the right. You know, I live in a house, I work in an office, I sit at a desk, everything's the same every day. Whereas the cowboy on the left side, you know, he goes out to grab a Christmas tree, right? He's riding his horse and he gets a Christmas tree to bring home for Christmas. Just being exposed to bacteria all the time. And I talked about, I think it was on coffee number 8, about the studies from Stanford that showed you go walking in the forest for 2.5 hours and you increase the #1 important component of your innate immune system, meaning the automatic immune system to protect you, natural killer cells. You increase the number of natural killer cells and you increase the bullets in the natural killer cell, the bactericidins, by doing a 2.5 hour walk in the forest. And if you do it 2 days in a row, you increase it even more. And they had the people then go walk in the city, it didn't increase at all. So being in the forest, being out in nature has a benefit for a diverse microbiome. But most of you don't have the opportunity to do that. So you have to put this much attention on your food selections to produce a similar result of building the diversity of your microbiome. So this is the summary slide of my 8-hour lectures on how to deal with autoimmune conditions and rebuild the gut and strengthen the immune system. So I put this slide up here because I want to talk about a few of these now and tell you, how do you rebuild a microbiome at home? There are 5 things I'm going to give you. These are the 5 things that will rebuild the diversity of your microbiome. You start today going forward, and you will find in a couple of months your bowels are working differently, your energy's up, your brain functions better. If you have a history of depression, it's not so bad anymore. You're not using your medications as much with the permission of your doctor, but you're just finding you're more stable, you're more alert. It'll take a few months, but that's what happens when you work on it every day. So first, #1, eliminate the inflammatory foods. You've heard me say the most common source of gasoline on the fire causing inflammation in your body is what's on the end of your fork. So you have to find out what foods are inflammatory. Now, the only food that is inflammatory consistently every time, every human, and there are many studies on this, is wheat. Whether it makes you sick or not, that's one that causes inflammation in everyone every time. The geek term for it is transient intestinal permeability, every time you eat wheat. Now, I'm not saying everyone needs to give up wheat, but everyone that has a health concern should be tested properly to see, is my immune system fighting wheat right now? If it is, then you give it up. And the test is called the wheat zoomer, because you zoom in on the problem. Go to my website and read about the wheat zoomer. There's nothing like it in the world. And as you may know, I lecture all over the world. There's no other laboratory that offers a test that's that comprehensive. But find out what foods your body is not good with and don't eat those foods. Now, next, fasting mimicking diets. What does that mean? As you move in the direction of eating all of your food in 8 hours a day, so that means for 16 hours a day, you're fasting. Some people don't like the word fasting, you know, it connotates some images or something. So don't use the word fasting. Just for 16 hours a day, you're not eating. You can drink a lot of beverages, that's fine. But food starts, maybe it's going to start at 10 in the morning and it goes to 6 in the evening. So you have your 5 p.m. dinner, you know, the senior special, right? So you go 5 p.m. and you get the senior special. Or Marzi and I have our coffee in the morning, And it's really nice right now. It's our quiet time together. We just sit and just not do anything, but just sit together for 15, 30 minutes and have our quiet time. And it's really nice. Marzi's there smiling now as I say that, right? And then we usually eat somewhere around 11 to 12. We'll eat our first meal. And then we have our second meal around 5 or 6, and then we're done. And you train your body to do that. It's not hard at all. And what it does when you do a fasting mimicking diet like that, an 8-16 or a 16-8, what it does reduces inflammation, burns fat. So if you're carrying a spare tire in your midsection, you burn fat. You use it for energy when you do that. It's a helpful tool. Next, and there are 5 big ones that I talk about, and this is number 1, prebiotics. Mrs. Patient, so let me be clear about this. All of these things that are listed here are the go-to program I teach doctors to change gut problems. And there are 5 that I give to everybody, and I'm going to talk mainly about those 5, right? So let's talk mainly about those 5 now. Prebiotics, the foods that feed the probiotics, the good bacteria in your gut. Why are they important? Just go online. Mrs. Patient, the fastest growing cells in your body are inside your nose, but the second fastest cells in your body are the lining of your gut. Every 2-3 days, you have a new lining for your gut. And the fuel for those cells to reproduce in your nose, in your gut, in your brain, the blood-brain barrier, the fuel is called butyric acid or butyrate. It's a good guy. And it's technically called a short-chain fatty acid, but it's butyrate. So when you build new cells, fastest growing cells in the body, inside lining of your gut, when you build those new cells, if you don't have enough butyrate, you build your house out of straw instead of brick. What does that mean? Just go to Google and type butyrate, low butyrate, and colon cancer, and see all the studies that you go, whoa, look at this. Boy, that butyrate is really important. And you probably won't read all the studies, but you get the idea that butyrate is the raw material to build healthy cells. But when you don't have enough butyrate, you build your house out of straw instead of brick. Whatever you got available, that's what you'll use to build the new cells. And they're not very good cells sometimes, and you're at higher risk of colon cancer. So how do you get butyrate? It's the action of the good bacteria in your gut. That's why you want good bacteria. It's the action of the good bacteria in your gut on vegetable fiber. Root vegetables are loaded with that fiber. All vegetables have fiber, which is good, but we're talking first here about root vegetables. Why? Mrs. Patient, when you go shopping for vegetables, buy organic, always organic, but get a couple of every root vegetable in the store. Why? Because get rutabagas and turnips and parsnips and Jerusalem artichoke and sweet potatoes and radishes and carrots. Not too many white potatoes because there are sugar problems if you eat too many white potatoes. But get the others. And you have 1 root vegetable every day. And people say, I don't know how to cook a rutabaga. Well, neither do I. But what I do is I dice up a rutabaga, just wash it, dice it up, slice an onion, peel some garlic, a little coconut oil or avocado oil in the pan, saute it all together until it's soft, throw some peanut sauce on it or red Thai chili sauce, whatever you like, and eat it. You don't have to be Julia Child. Well, how do you do a turnip? I dice it up, slice an onion, peel some garlic, add a little olive oil, coconut oil or avocado oil, saute it up till it's soft, add some sauce to it, and I eat it. Well, what about carrots? Slice them up, saute them, and eat them. Well, can I eat carrots raw? Absolutely. Can I eat radishes raw? Absolutely. Most of us have been to nice restaurants where they peel slivers of radishes and they put it on a salad. You look at it and say, well, I've never eaten radish. You go, I'll try that. Oh, that's not bad, right? Those vegetable fibers feed the good bacteria in your gut. So every day you have 1 root vegetable. Then you go on Google and you type in list of prebiotic foods and print out the list. And you're going to learn that a banana is a prebiotic. An onion is a prebiotic. Print out the list. And every day you have 2 from the list. So 1 root vegetable and 2 from the list every day. That's number 1. Number 2, Marzi and I take a prebiotic powder, and Mrs. Patient, for 2 months, while you're building the healthy microbiome, I want you to take a prebiotic powder along with the root vegetables for 2 months. Marzi and I take it every day. We put it in our smoothies, but I'm not asking you to take it long term. Just take it 2 months. That's enough to help make sure you build up a good supply of food for the good bacteria. We like a product called Mega Prebiotic, and we'll put a link here for you afterwards. Mega Prebiotic. And it helps supply a lot of the good food for your good bacteria to grow. That's number 2. Number 3, Mrs. Patient, I want you to get 5 different types of fermented vegetables. Get kimchi, sauerkraut, miso, fermented beets, curry flavored, whatever you want, but get 5 different flavors of fermented vegetables and have a forkful every day. Why? Because each vegetable that ferments produces different families of probiotics, the good bacteria. So you're inoculating yourself when you take a forkful of fermented vegetables, you're inoculating your gut with the good bacteria. And most important is the diversity of the good bacteria, as much as possible, as many different types of good bacteria as possible. You want the diversity to protect you. That's your army. So a tablespoon every, well, can I have more? Of course you can have more. You have as much as you want. Well, my kids won't eat fermented vegetables. Hide it in their mashed potatoes. Pour salad dressing on it. Drown it in salad dressing. Do whatever you have to do. Get it down. And just start with a little bit if you have to and gradually build it up. That's number 3. Along with that, number 3, Mrs. Patient, I want you to get a supplement of probiotics for 2 months. Just like with the prebiotic, for a couple of months, you're going to take a probiotic to make sure you're building up the immunity, you're building up the diversity of your immune system in your gut. Those of you that got sick with even a light flu-like symptoms, or you had a little fever, or those of you had to go to the hospital, you really need to do this 5-part protocol because you need to build this up for next time. If this comes back in the fall, and there are many that are saying it may, and historically one would think it might, you want an army down there that's going to protect you big time. So, and the product that we like is called Mega Spore. The other one's called Mega Prebiotic, and this is Mega Spore. We'll put the link here for you because the spore therapies are much more impactful than taking the standard probiotics, because much of the standard probiotics get killed by the acid in your stomach. But the spores just get activated by the acid in your stomach, so they just start giving you more of the good bacteria. And the last one is, Mrs. Patient, buy 5-10 apples at a time. Organic, of course, because lots of bad chemicals in not organic apples. Wash them, don't peel them, cut the seeds out, dice them up, put them in a pot, add water to about 1/3 the height of the apples, put some cinnamon in there, a couple of raisins, turn it on high. Let it boil. 10 minutes, 12 minutes, something like that. Look in the pot. When you see a shine on the skin of the apple, it's done. Turn it off. You've got applesauce. You just made applesauce. The shine on the skin of the apple is the pectin in the apple that's been released now and easily is accessible to the microbiome in your small intestine right away. Why is that important? Because a very powerful enzyme, maybe the most important enzyme, arguably, they're all important, but in terms of all the benefits that it does for you, is called intestinal alkaline phosphatase, IAP. Intestinal alkaline phosphatase lowers cholesterol if it's too high, lowers triglycerides if they're too high, stabilizes insulin sensitivity if you've got blood sugar problems, helps the good bacteria to colonize and grab onto the walls of the intestines, helps to feeds the genes to kill the bad bacteria, and most importantly, reduces endotoxin, that's the garbage of bad bacteria getting into your bloodstream, by 73%. Remember I said that 1/3 of all the small molecules in your bloodstream are from the bacteria in your gut? Well, some of that is not good bacteria. And IAP reduces that by 73%. And how do you increase IAP? Have a couple of tablespoons of applesauce every day. That's all it takes. Those are the things. Those are the 5 things. Root vegetables, a prebiotic supplement. Fermented vegetables, a probiotic supplement. Applesauce. Those 5 things will go a long way to rebuilding a healthy microbiome. And there's more things you can do, like taking bone broth and then the other nutrients you see here that are really great for you. But those are the basics that will get the job done for you. I realized that these are supposed to be 20 to 40 minutes. I think I went a little longer than that. I get on a roll. But I want to say all of these are available to you. The transcripts, the videos, the slides, the studies are all available at theDr.com/coffee. And thank you all for this opportunity to be with you. I will be back in 1 week. We're going to do these once a week on Mondays, giving you action steps that you can do. There's one last thing I would like to say to you, that there's a lot of discussion now online about this time in our world is quite an amazing time, that this is an opportunity for major change that's coming. I'm not a conspiracy guy, but there are hundreds of thousands of people who are focusing their attention on doing the right thing. Like we're all isolated right now, right? They're calling their cousins who they haven't talked to in a while and just expressing a little love, even saying the word that they may never have said before. They're writing to people they haven't written to in years. They're trying to bring good energy out in the world in this time of chaos that we've got. And the premise that is out there right now is that it's time for a change, that our world has been getting more and more violent and more greedy. And this may be the opportunity for all of us to be a little kinder. You know, there's a word in Tibetan Buddhism called Maitri. I'm not sure I'm saying it correctly. It's spelled M-A-I-T-R-I, Maitri. And it means loving kindness and an unconditional friendship with oneself. I read that word, an explanation of it by a gal named Pema Chodron, and it just was like, I got hit. Whoa. Have I ever been kind to myself? Am I kind to myself? And that was a paradigm shift for me when I was thinking about that one. And as I'm kind to myself, I'm much kinder to others. So I wanted a reminder for myself of that, and I didn't think to put a picture here. But the license plate that I have on the biggest, baddest Harley Davidson they ever made is called the Screaming Eagle. And I have the original Screaming Eagle. They made 125 of them. And I've got the original, and my license plate is Maitri. Loving kindness and an unconditional friendship with oneself. This doesn't mean being airy-fairy and blessing everyone. You know, everybody has their own way of expressing loving kindness, right? But I'd ask that you think about this and just think about, can I be kinder in my life? And some of you will feel like you're being more vulnerable, right? In being kind. Yeah, you are maybe. But so what? If somebody gets off the phone after talking to you, they laugh, boy, he's really something. He actually said he loves me. Ha. Okay, so that's their problem, not yours, right? So I wish you much happiness this week and hope you'll explore some of these concepts and begin rebuilding your army. Have a little applesauce and root vegetables, and I'll see you next Monday. Thank you all very much. See you next week.